The research vessel, Ithrix 9, drifted silently in the dark between stars. It was a sleek alien craft belonging to the Cathari Collective, an advanced civilization that had cataloged thousands of species across the galaxy. The Cathari were scholars, scientists, observers. They prided themselves on understanding life better than anyone else. But one species had recently caught their attention: humans. Primitive compared to most interstellar civilizations, violent history, fragile biological structure, highly emotional, and yet strangely persistent. Several Cathari probes had recorded incidents that defied their expectations. Humans surviving in conditions that should have killed them. Humans continuing to fight even when injured beyond logical limits. Humans enduring extreme psychological stress without surrender. To the Cathari, this made no sense, so they decided to study it. Closely. Very closely. The capture. Inside the observation chamber of Ithrix 9, 5 Cathari scientists watched a holographic display showing a blue planet, rotating slowly in space. Earth. Subject acquisition is complete, reported researcher Thalvira. The chamber lights dimmed as a containment pod slid open in the center of the room. Inside, a human sat on a metal bench. He looked unimpressive. Average height, muscular but not exceptional, dark hair, calm expression. He rubbed his wrists where the restraints had been removed and looked around the room with quiet curiosity. Subject appears conscious, Thalvira noted. Senior researcher Kelrath tilted his elongated head. This creature is responsible for the anomalous endurance reports. Yes. Kelrath studied the human carefully. So fragile. Soft skin, exposed organs, inefficient skeletal design. Another scientist flicked through data on a glowing display. According to our analysis, human physiology should fail under moderate environmental stress, yet they repeatedly survive conditions beyond predicted limits. Kelroth made a decision. Begin testing. Phase 1. Environmental stress. The human, identified in his planetary records as Daniel Carter, stood inside a white chamber surrounded by transparent alloy walls. A speaker activated. Human subject, you will be participating in a series of endurance evaluations. Daniel looked up toward the ceiling. Am I supposed to understand that? The Cathari paused. He comprehends our translation matrix, Thalvira noted. Oh, great. Alien lab experiment. Just my luck. Kelrath ignored the sarcasm. Begin temperature reduction. Inside the chamber, the air temperature began to drop. 20 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees Celsius, 0 degrees Celsius. Frost began forming along the walls. Daniel crossed his arms and exhaled slowly. Okay, getting cold. The temperature kept falling. -10 degrees Celsius, -20 degrees Celsius. Kelrath watched carefully. Subject should experience hypothermic shutdown soon. But Daniel didn't collapse. Instead, he started moving, jogging in place, shaking out his arms, breathing steadily. Minutes passed, then an hour. Thalvira frowned at the readings. Core temperature stable, subject maintaining circulation through continuous motion. Kelrath leaned forward. How long can this continue? Unknown. Daniel looked up again and muttered through chattering teeth. You guys ever heard of jackets? The Cathari did not understand the humor, but they did understand the data. The subject should have failed already, yet he kept going. Kelrath narrowed his eyes. Increase difficulty. Phase 2. Heat endurance. The chamber temperature began rising, slowly at first, then rapidly. 20 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees Celsius, 60 degrees Celsius. The air shimmered.
Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. Okay, now it's a sauna. The heat climbed higher, 80 degrees Celsius. Kelrath expected the human to collapse. Instead, Daniel paced, slowly, controlling his breathing. Sweat poured from his body, cooling his skin. Fascinating, Talvira whispered. Perspiration response is regulating body temperature. Kelrath frowned, but not indefinitely. The heat climbed to 95 degrees Celsius. Any other species would already be dead. Daniel staggered slightly, but he stayed upright. Man, you aliens really suck at hospitality. Kelrath stared in disbelief. Terminate heat cycle. The chamber cooled again. Daniel dropped to one knee, but he was still alive, still conscious. Phase 3, isolation. The next test was psychological. The chamber lights went dark. No sound, no movement, no time indicators, just blackness. The Cathari waited. Most species broke quickly under sensory deprivation. Within hours, they began screaming, hallucinating, or begging for stimulation. Daniel sat quietly in the darkness. 10 minutes passed, then 30, then 2 hours. Finally, he spoke. Well, this is boring. He stood up and began pacing slowly. Then he started talking to himself. Okay, Danny, remember that camping trip in Colorado? The Cathari exchanged confused glances. What is he doing? Asked Thalvira. Kelrath studied the neural scans. Maintaining cognitive engagement. Daniel continued narrating random memories. Then he started singing. Poorly. Very poorly, but loudly. Thalvira looked horrified. What is that sound? Unknown. Hours passed. Daniel kept himself entertained. Stories, songs, jokes, even imaginary conversations. The human mind was filling the silence with its own stimulation. Kelrath finally ordered the lights back on. Daniel blinked at the sudden brightness. Oh, hey, you guys back? The scientists stared at the data in stunned silence. Phase 4, physical limits. The final stage was designed to break him. Inside the chamber, gravity increased. 1.5 G, 2 G. Daniel's knees bent under the pressure. Kelrath watched closely. Musculoskeletal failure expected. Daniel grunted. Oh, that's heavy. Gravity climbed to 3G. Daniel dropped to one knee. But he didn't collapse. He forced himself back up. Step by step, he began walking. The Cathari stared. No species should remain mobile at this pressure, Thalvira said. Daniel's muscles trembled violently. Sweat poured down his face, but he kept moving. Come on, he whispered to himself. Just keep going.
Kelrath's voice grew quiet. Why does it continue? Another scientist analyzed the neural data. Motivational response. Human psychology resists surrender. Gravity increased again. 4G. Daniel finally collapsed onto both knees. The chamber floor cracked slightly beneath him. Kelrath leaned forward. Endurance limit reached. But then, Daniel planted his hands on the floor and slowly pushed himself back up. The observation deck went silent. No, Thalvira whispered. That is not possible. Daniel stood again, barely, but standing. He raised his head toward the observation window and smiled. Kelrath suddenly felt something unfamiliar. Unease. Terminate test. Gravity returned to normal. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily. But he was still alive, still conscious, still smiling. The realization. Hours later, the Cathari gathered in the observation chamber. The test results floated in holographic displays around them. Kelrath spoke slowly. Our assumptions about humans were incorrect. Thalvira nodded. Their physiology is inefficient, but their survival mechanisms are extraordinary. Another researcher added quietly, and their psychology appears dangerously resilient. Kelrath stared through the glass at Daniel, resting in the chamber. Why? No one had an answer. An unexpected signal. Suddenly, alarms echoed through the ship. A technician rushed into the chamber. "Commander, incoming vessels!" Kelrath turned sharply. "Identify them." The holographic display zoomed in. 3 crude spacecraft had appeared near the research vessel. They looked primitive, metal plates welded together, engines burning unevenly. But they were armed, and they were approaching fast. Thalvira analyzed the signal transmissions. Human language detected. Kelrath's eyes widened. How did they locate us? Another scientist answered quietly. They didn't. Everyone turned. The voice had come from inside the containment chamber. Daniel stood slowly, stretching his arms. He looked directly at them through the glass. "You guys picked up the wrong human." Kelrath felt a chill. "What do you mean?" Daniel grinned. "I'm not a random civilian." He tapped his chest. "Search and rescue pilot." The alien scientists froze. Daniel continued calmly. "And when my beacon stopped transmitting, my team came looking." Outside the ship, the human vessels powered their weapons. Kelrath's voice trembled. "Those ships cannot defeat us." Daniel shrugged. "Maybe not." Then he smiled again. "But humans don't quit." Panic. The human ships began firing. Primitive railguns slammed into the research vessel's shields. Kelrath scoffed at first. Insignificant. But the attacks didn't stop. They kept coming. Over and over and over. Human persistence. Their shields slowly drained. Thalvira whispered in horror. "They are not retreating." Kelrath stared at the tactical display. "They cannot win." "Yes, but they are still fighting." Another impact rocked the ship. Daniel leaned casually against the chamber wall. "Told you." Kelrath suddenly understood something terrifying. If one human could endure their experiments, what could millions do? The decision. Kelrath made a rare choice. Release the subject. The chamber doors opened. Daniel stepped out. 2 alien guards hesitated nervously. Daniel raised his hands peacefully. "Relax, I'm not here to fight." Kelrath studied him carefully. "Your species displays irrational persistence." Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, that's kind of our thing." Kelrath looked back at the tactical display. Human ships still attacking, still refusing to retreat. Finally, he gave the order. "Return the human to his people." The ending. Hours later, Daniel's rescue craft drifted beside the alien ship. Before leaving, he turned back to Kelrath. "You know, you could have just asked." Kelrath tilted his head. "Asked what?" "About human endurance." Daniel smiled. "We survive because we have to." He stepped into the airlock. Moments later, the human ships departed. The research vessel remained silent. Kelrath stared at the empty chamber. The experiment had answered their question. Humans were fragile, imperfect, emotionally unstable, but they possessed something no data model had predicted. They simply refused to break. And that was far more dangerous than strength.